Good afternoon from Prague. I am Martina Pecková-Černá, and I am greeting you from the Arts and Theatre Institute. It is our pleasure to welcome you to the Green Thursday series of international online discussions with Czech and foreign guests from the field of performing arts. We are here every fourth Thursday at the same time, 3 p.m. Central European Time, with diverse moderators and guests ranging from dance and theater artists to curators, culture managers, and theorists.
The overall topic, "The show must go on, offline," was chosen so that we can address the common theme of sustainability and the performing arts from many perspectives. These include the response of the performing arts to the state of the environment and the COVID pandemic, as well as the field's emerging strategies to address urgent social changes and paradigm shifts in culture and in our societies. These discussions are organised by the International Cooperation Department and in collaboration with the European projects Create to Connect, Create to Impact, and the Central European Performing Arts Network, PACE V4. They are also linked to the main theme of this year's Theatre Night in the Czech Republic, which is sustainability. They also correspond with the arts and theatre institutes, culture, and the climate activities, which serve as a communication platform for public and independent cultural organisations in the Czech Republic on global environmental challenges. We are available online on the Zoom platform right now, and later you can find our recordings on our YouTube channel. You, our spectators, will have the opportunity to ask our guests questions during the live meeting. Please feel free to use the Q&A section in your Zoom application.
So, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, dear panelists, dear attendees. We are back in the new year with our Green Thursdays discussions. And today we will discuss the topic digital audience. The closure of theaters, dance spaces, cultural centers, and public spaces for live art productions during the coronavirus pandemic has resulted in a mass migration of the performing arts to digital platforms. How are spectators reacting to this? What do we know about theater-going audiences of the pre-COVID era? And how have they changed with the relocation of theater, dance, and contemporary circus productions to the online environment? Has this shift brought about a decrease in viewership, or is it a tool for audience development? What data is available on the digital audience? How can we monitor and evaluate the behavior of the digital spectator, and with what ways do these methods differ from the types of marketing analyses carried out in culture organizations under normal circumstances? I am Martina Pecková-Černá from the Arts and Theatre, and together with my guests, we will try to answer at least some of these questions. So my today's guests are Bogna Kietlinska, who represents the Institute of Applied Social Sciences of the University in Warsaw. We have here Michal Lazňovský, the head of the Arts Management Department at the Theatre Faculty Academy for Performing Arts in Prague. Jonathan Goodacre, responsible for the international work of the Audience Agency in United Kingdom. The Audience Agency helps culture organizations to understand and engage with their audiences. And Jonathan is also pedagogical team member of the European Diploma in Culture Project Management. And last but not least, we have here Achim Müller, the head of research and projects at the Berlin Institute for Culture and Media Industry. So hello, everyone. I'm glad to introduce you and have you here in our discussion. I hope that we will have a bit theoretical session, but also with some practical outcome for our attendees, so that they are better oriented how to engage with their audiences, also in these times, which are really difficult for live arts and especially for theater and dance scene. So we should start maybe with the first topic and get back a little bit to the past. Let's talk a while about the pre-COVID era. So let's get back to the times when theaters and dance venues were opened and they operated under normal conditions. And let's check what kind of data or knowledge do we have about the theater audiences or culture audiences in all the countries which are represented in today's panel. Let's start with the lady. So please, Bogna, could you tell us what do we know about Polish theater audiences?
Of course, I need to emphasize that we still have to deal with the lack of nationwide research on theater audience. There are some local studies, such as the study of theater audience in Warsaw, but most of them are not representative. And this gap is also not filled by the Statistic Poland data. I need to say that Statistic Poland is the biggest data institution, national institution in Poland. But this data covers only institutional theaters, and it doesn't cover audience. The most detailed data is provided by the Zbigniew Raszewski Theatre Institute, which regularly publish documentation on the seasons titled Theatre in Poland. Data gathered by the institutes reflects the whole richness of Polish theatrical life, including theaters of every kind, but it doesn't cover audience. So we have to deal with many gaps and many empty white places. However, based on local research, we can assume that it's mainly women who participate in theatrical life, and most of them live in larger cities and have higher education. Visit to the theater is not only an aesthetic experience to them, but also occasion for social encounter. And we also know that women more often than men visit libraries, specialist bookstores, and community centers. And they more willingly use the institutions offered traditionally associated with high culture, such as galleries and museums and theaters. But at the same time, men have higher amounts for their own needs, higher amounts of money for their own needs and pleasures, but they rarely spend it on culture. So this is very general picture. We still have to do researches on the audience because this is the biggest problem that we can't really compare how the digital audience differs from the real one. I mean, I say real, but you know what I mean. And I think this is for now. We have to deal with it somehow. At the beginning of the first lockdown in Poland, I conducted an online survey entitled "Theater in the Times of the Coronavirus Epidemic in Poland," and here it's not representative. Yes, it's also the same problems as normally we have with other studies, but also in my survey, 77% of the respondents were women, mainly between 21 up to 40 years old, and with higher education or semi-higher education, living in Warsaw or in other big cities in Poland. So I think that this is also similar. I mean, the structure of the sample is similar to the general picture of theater audience in Poland. And unfortunately, this is all I can say for now.
Thank you. What data do we have here in the Czech Republic, Michal? Can you share with us what do we know about theater audiences? Is it similar, the situation as in Poland, or?
Yes, I don't think there's very major differences between the audience in Czech Republic and Poland. It's mostly women, it's mostly higher educated people, and so on and so forth. I don't know about the direct comparison with Poland, but we also conducted some research with some partners, including Jonathan here, on the differences between the audience, and I believe he will present the differences later. But we found mostly the differences between, let's say, the taste or the approach to the theater, rather than many differences in the demographic data about the audience, actually. So in numbers in 2019, which is a data published very lately by our statistical institute on culture, it says that in 2019 we had 205 theaters in the Czech Republic, which is complemented by 178 theater buildings without their own repertoire. So it's been 43,000 seats that's been offered in regular theaters. So it's 4.1 seat for 1,000 of inhabitants of the Czech Republic. So, of course, these numbers, if they are not compared to others, don't say much. But in general, the theater, the number of seats and performances in Czech Republic is very high, I think, in comparison with Europe, within Europe, let's say, and the theater network or infrastructure here is pretty strong. Of course, visiting the theaters in numbers might not be that strong, let's say. It's 6,831 visitors in theater per year in 2019. Of course, the numbers for 2020 will be very difficult, different, but we might talk about that later on. So that's the first input.
Thank you. Achim, how is it in Germany? What do you know about your audiences?
Thank you. So just to say, I prepared some little slides. I hope they are informative on. Oh no, I shared the wrong one. I'm sorry. There you go. So basically, what one has to say that I think comparing the situation described by Michal and Bogna for Poland and the Czech Republic, and what surely will come up from Jonathan for the UK, I think that Germany constitutes kind of intermediary position, kind of middle position, because we have kind of the employer organization, the Deutsche Bühnenverein, the Association of German stages, which also includes the public orchestras, and which contains about kind of almost 200 theater and orchestras with constant buildings. And so from them we have at least the absolute numbers of audiences very precisely yearly published, and also differentiated by genres. But of course, what we don't have is any kind of in-depth data on the structure and motivations of those audiences on a national level. Nevertheless, there is there are first trends towards integrating research from individual theaters. There's an institute that has been founded in Berlin, which is called Institut für kulturelle Teilhabeforschung. They are very international, so they don't have an English title for it yet. So, but they are trying to, they are also carrying out the research in the also Berlin based, but by now already active on a German national level. The initiative Kuhlmann, which here really does collect data from theaters, performing arts houses, and museums, other kinds of cultural organizations, and so try to get them together and compare the between types of organizations, genres, art fields. So there's a tendency towards that, and of course there's an increasing number of theaters in Germany who are aware of that kind of pressure towards kind of analyzing their audiences, and also doing population surveys. And we've been kind of conducting a few of them, and what we can say, for instance, is that from population surveys that about kind of we have, as you may be aware, in Germany, this it's quite specific type of organizations, city and state theater, holding or presenting quite often between 3 to 5 different genres from opera, musical, drama, theater, ballet, dance, children and youth theater. And so with these large structures, we have shown that if they are well run, and most of them in the end are, they, throughout the life cycle of the population, they reach about 70% of the population, at least once in their life. And this is a share that kind of doesn't share, it seems to not to share so much corresponding to efforts in audience development. What audience development rather changed is kind of the frequency and intent of visits, the intensity of relationship to those houses. We see that drama theater, together with musical and comedy stand-up, are the most often attended genres of the performing arts, with opera, ballet, dance following up, not so far behind, but with a little difference. Between kind of 40% in a representative research on the population in Berlin had been visiting at least once in the last 12 months, a drama theater, a musical theater, the comedy or stand-up, and about 30% either opera or ballet or dance theater. And what we also can show, what we did as the Center for Audience Development here at the IKMW, the Institute for Arts and Media Industries, are finding that we did put together the data from by now around 30 visitor surveys that we did, and compared them. Well, and so we, on average, we found out pretty similar patterns as already presented by Bogna and Michal, and probably also from what I know from the UK and other European studies, so we'll come to that later, similar to what you find. So yeah, that's it's pretty old. It's older than on average, about 78% above 70 years old, 50% above 60-year-old. What we also always do is kind of to compare between different genres. So there are specific patterns for genres. The oldest audience is always in classical concerts, sometimes well above 60% older than 60 years. Education, on average, around 60% with academic degrees. Again, the highest in classical concerts, with 70%. Surprising fact, also perhaps, that the highest degrees of academics also might be found in contemporary drama theater and performance theater. So the residency, about 90% have the residence within 80 kilometers from the location of the house, which means that people can go there to and from within 1 day without having to stay overnight. And opera and musical usually having kind of a slightly larger reach. People are willing to travel further for that than for the other genres. And also, I mean, this we are always talking about when we're talking about audience development and all also digital stage. the show visitors with a different, Staatsbürgerschaft, excuse me, I didn't put in, so, which have a different pass at birth is considerably lower than in the average population. So the share there we have is usually around 10%, 12%, even in houses that have quite extensive audience development programs. But of course, one has to keep aware, and then they also have kind of most of their visitors coming from opera very often, which sells out quite often venues of about 1,000, 1,200 seats compared to the usual size of audience development activities. Well, it shows how difficult it is to get these target groups into that program. But this is kind of a little insight of what we know, both nationally and from our research about the audiences in Germany.
What about independent companies? Are there some data about them? Do maybe some organizations collect data from these theaters?
Not that I know of. I mean, the problem of independent groups is always that they are relying on data from the venues where they play. So very few. I don't know any independent group that collects that in Germany. I mean, the thing is that with the funding regulations in Germany, they don't have to. Mm-hmm. So it's for them, it's nice, and sometimes they use it for evaluation. I did that. I collected for a group that where I evaluated their cooperation with a big state theater. So I did that, but on a constant level now.
Yeah, that's interesting that they are not obliged to deliver the data because I think it's different, the situation in our country, isn't it, Michal?
Well, it is different on the paper.
Yes.
Yeah, the Czech statistical findings are obligatory, or the organizations have a duty to submit data on their the numbers that are asked to be provided by the official. But the thing is, one thing, the methodology is not really very useful for the theaters and the strategic management of the culture as it is, because it's rather, let's say, instrumental, because it describes well the organizations themselves, how they work, how many employees they have, what's their effectivity, let's say, but it says very few on the audience. There's a big gap in the knowledge of the audience in the Czech Republic, so we have only the general data that I provided, and then we have some data from minor researches, but actually it's not really representative for the Czech Republic as it is. So yes, the organizations have to provide data, but they're never, let's say, that there's no instrument to make them. So it's just on the paper. And there's no way how to really make them. So the data is not, let's say, verified. We can't really trust the data we get from on the national level, and that's the problem. So we have some data, but nobody really believes it's very representative.
Mm-hmm.
Achim was...
sorry, Achim, yeah?
Yeah, perhaps a side remark. I mean, from what we did, as I said, is that we always compare sometimes with the theaters, like we work with down to the level of single performances and look at the audience structure of simple or productions rather. So to have a larger number of kind of as a basis for percentages, so we did that. But what we see is that it's not so much kind of a matter of the type of group performing on stage, whether it's the ensemble or a free group. For the audience, from what we see, that's more or less, that it doesn't matter to them. What they want to see is a specific genre, a specific type of production, a specific aesthetics. And so it's rather that is deciding on who comes. And so if you would describe me kind of the aesthetic profile of a free group and where they want to play, then I could at least, I would be so bold as to make at least an estimated guess on what kind of audience they will attract.
Bogna, what about the obligation to deliver data in Poland?
I mean, it depends on the source of the financing. So if it's national one, for example, money comes from the Ministry of Culture, then they need to write kind of detailed reports. But there is a difference between the fulfilling some indicators and then reality, because in each project we have to show what indicators we want to reach. So sometimes the amount of people, the number of people is not really realistic, and this is the problematic one. So I would never count on this data actually. And it's also, I mean, different projects have different type of reports, and it's also important to say that in general we have problems with financing, for example, NGOs. So sometimes they just perform without any money, or they just do what they can based on their own sources. So then there is no official data. So this is also the problem. That's what, in my opinion, that's the reason of these wide gaps concerning data in general. So yes.
Okay, let's leave now the Central European region and unfortunately also the European Union and have a look how the situation is in the United Kingdom. So Jonathan, could you share some comments with us?
Well, actually, funnily enough, what I have is a bit of research on countries outside the UK, and not least the Czech Republic, but also Bulgaria, Austria, Croatia and Finland, because as you mentioned, as Mikhail mentioned, we have been working on a project with a few people in Europe looking at theatre audiences. And I've got a couple of slides to share. But I just wanted, it's interesting because I wanted to pick up on some of those points there, which I think that is worth pointing out, because we are very keen to produce research which is actually useful research for organisations as well. And I think it was quite interesting that what you were just saying, like Mikhail was saying that in the Czech Republic, people have to produce data, but it's kind of for a central resource, it's for the government or something like this. We also have to do that. And that's also what made a strong emphasis on audience data about 10 years ago. But we actually want to work both ways and to help the cultural organisations themselves. And I think that relates to one or two of the points I want to make. So I've got a few things to show here. I don't want to go on forever, but I wanted to connect what we're talking about now with what we're going to talk about in a minute about the situation, the COVID-19, because I think there are some links here. And I think that one of the things that we would argue for is that in order to kind of do good culture, to do good theatre, we need to involve the audience, and we need to understand that audience. And this, for example, is in Bulgaria and Sofia, one of the partners on the ASIT project, in fact. This is from last summer, where they have actually adapted according to the situation of the COVID-19 pandemic. We just quickly go back to this previous slide. One of the things we work on is the evaluation of Galway 2020 European Capital of Culture. And as you can imagine, that has been a nightmare for them, as it has also for Rijeka in Croatia, the other European Capital of Culture. They've both had to adapt really strongly to the situation. I mentioned that this picture on the right-hand side, Savage Beauty by Caricola, was an interesting example, which we can come to later, which is, it was an event which you were supposed to visit in the mountains of Connemara in Ireland. And the COVID pandemic hit just when it was about to happen. But what they did was they used the work that was there. What they actually did was they used a drone to go over the area and do some beautiful filming, which they then put online, which people looked at over a period of time. So there's that reaction. There's the top left-hand corner is quite a few organisations have closed down. This is the Indianapolis Contemporary, which closed down last year. On the bottom left is a theatre in Britain called Yvonne Arnaud Theatre, who've done some very good productions, actually streamed productions. Anyway, we'll come back to a lot of that. I just wanted to mention that what we are really about is that we want to go beyond making some statements which are based on kind of statistics, say, for example, of how many people go to theatres in, say, in the Czech Republic. And you know, what we're very interested in, and what I find very interesting is really to know a bit more about who this audience is, why they're there, what they think about the experience, what kind of what they have in common, what's good about it, why do they come or why don't they come, relating to what Akin was saying about audience development. So, you know, we argue a lot for audience research, about knowing rather than guessing. There are obviously various methodologies which can be used. We're not going to talk about those today. We'll talk a little bit about quite a lot of research that we do, which relates to the ASSET project, which is around using audience survey, audience questionnaires. So this is the project that Mikhail and Martina were referring to, co-funded by the Creative Europe programme. By the way, Britain's still allowed to be in the Creative Europe programme for about another couple of years before we get thrown out. When we can't join any new projects, by the way, but that's not the point right now.
We'll kick you out sooner if you don't give us the vaccines, you know.
Yes, interesting point. Let's not get into that right now. The ASSET project, 20 theatres in 5 cities and 4 countries. 4 theatres in 5 cities. We are looking at researching those audiences. Quite a long and interesting process. It's been going on over 2 or 3 years. It's based, as I said, almost entirely on survey methodology. We can talk about that later, but I mention this because, for example, in the UK, we do a lot of research using data collected, for example, from ticketing. We also do work around online analytics. We also, of course, do qualitative sort of evaluation research as well. But this is based on survey methodology. And it's based on the good old-fashioned idea of asking a sample of the audience what they think about various things, who they are, etc., etc. And as I said, on this project in particular and in general, we're interested to know what motivates people to go to the theatre. And for example, I put this up because when we're working people, if you talk to people and say, oh, what's a barrier to, why don't people go to the theatre? And ticket price, they'd be saying, oh, the tickets are too expensive and all those sorts of things. We know that through some of this research that, for example, ticket price is important to some people, not so important to others. And in fact, in the Czech Republic, it's actually one of the least important factors, even compared to other countries as well. So this is, just want to show that I think one of the interesting things about data, once you've got enough of it, which is of course an issue, is you can start to make interesting comparisons between types of things that motivate, here different sorts of things that motivate people, and between countries. And Martina and Mikhail will know that we've some very interesting things that we can draw out, which are different between countries, but also some similarities. For example, on you can see that in the Czech Republic column, we can see that when we looked at those, what's important, the biggest one in the 4 theatres we worked with was theme or subject matter, compared to, for example, ticket price, which was much lower down. So and this comes back to what I want to talk about with the COVID-19 thing as well, because the ASSET project has at the centre the idea of segmentation. Now, segmentation, as most of you will know, is an idea of kind of grouping your audience or grouping the public into meaningful groupings of people. And that's, you know, if you're doing it well, it goes beyond the idea of demographics. It goes beyond the idea of how old someone is, but look at other aspects to it. And we know that different people have different reasons for engaging in the theatre and want different things out of it. And also some people attend a lot and some people don't attend very much. So one of the things that we've done with the ASSET project is to try and develop some segments. The segments are based on a variety of things, but at the heart of it, we have this question at the top here, which is asking people to put themselves on a scale between whether they like to see something new or whether they like to see something classic, whether they like lots of information or whether they like to take a chance about going to something, whether they want to see well-known performers or whether they like to see new people. And then link to that other things like what sort of things they like to go to, what sort of communications they prefer. And by doing that, you then start to develop some segments. This is cutting a very long process very quickly just to show you a couple of slides, but this is how it pans out in terms of segments, because then as you analyze it, you can start to see people grouped together into certain things which is important for them. For example, you got, if I just draw out something that's the discovery segment, 5% overall of theatre audiences in those 5 countries. They are people who like to try something out and they don't necessarily want to know a lot about it beforehand. They will often book at short notice and they will try something out. They're often younger people, often studenty types, but not always. So, and there's a variety of other things which we can go into. And then of course, as I said, once you've got those things, and if you repeat the methodology between countries, you can start to compare things. These are weighted a little bit, so they evens out the differences a little bit. But you can see that in different places there are different things that are important. For example, this thing about star power is a big thing in some countries. The idea, we called it star power. It means the idea that people want to know well-known performers, companies, that sort of thing. But in other places, not very, like in Vienna, in the sample we're working with, not so important. And these are our segments. These we are working this, and Mikhail, of course, will tell you about a conference we're going to be doing later on in the year, which we hope that some of you will attend, where we will describe some of this in more detail. There's also going to be a fantastic book that we're writing at the moment about the whole subject. But these are the segments we basically have come up with, and I don't want to go into those in detail. You don't need to know these, but it's just worth saying that these are segments based very much around preferences for doing things, for the sort of a performance you want to see and the sort of things you look for, and it goes beyond art form and genres. So you might find that, for example, if contemporary knowledge, people in that group are interested in contemporary work across a range of art forms, whether it's, say, it's dance or drama or contemporary circus, say, you know, so that becomes a more meaningful distinction than if they merely like going to opera or something like this. That was then. This is now. We will come back to those subjects in a minute, but I wanted just to kind of put some of those ideas before you right now.
Thank you, Jonathan. Thank you for presenting the asset project. Before we go to some comparisons among diverse countries, just a question about the UK audiences. Was there something in these interim results of the asset project? What surprised you in reference to the data about audiences in your country?
I think there are many similarities. I think there are some interesting comparisons. For example, I haven't presented the data here, but in terms of the demographics, in somewhere like the Czech Republic, there's a much younger audience than you would find in Britain. And indeed, I mean, London is a little bit different. It's very strange in the UK because London is like its own country. You know, it's very different from the rest of the UK. So age is different. We know that looking at the data that the age profile of theatre attenders in Britain was much more similar to the Nordic nations, to Finland in particular. So that's interesting. I think one of the things that we were surprised at, which is this element of what we've called star power. It's a bit of a shorthand, but it's certainly in some of the Central European countries, we found in the initial work we did that was tremendous importance given to knowing who was on stage, knowing if they were well-known, respected performers. And I think you don't necessarily get that in the UK unless you are talking about the National Theatre itself, the big national organisations. It's not quite the same. I think that's an interesting phenomenon.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Michal, would you like to add something about the asset project? Because it's a project supported from the Creative Europe program, and there are many partners in the project, but the theatre faculty is the leader, the main organizer of this project. So maybe you would like to add something?
Yeah. So I was notified that my connection wasn't so good. So I hope you can hear me well.
It's better.
Perfect. I should have been prepared for that, but I will open some slides about the asset project. Meanwhile, I will talk about the basics, and you can add more about it, any one of you included. The asset project was started in 2019. It will come to an end in June this year, and it has 7 partners, 2 of Prague, which is the Academy of Performing Arts, represented by Department of Arts Management of the Theatre Faculty, then Theatre Institute of the Czech Republic is also partner in the project, as well as the audience agency represented by Jonathan here, which is the main leader in the methodology of the project. And then there's University of Metropolitan University of Helsinki, and 3 other partners in Zagreb, Croatia, Sofia, Bulgaria, and Austria in Vienna. In 5 of the cities, European cities, we are collecting data about the audience, trying to follow and implement the methodology of segmentation of the audience to better know our audience, to find the segments, and to a bit learn from the British example in this, where the segmentation, thanks to the audience agency and others, is far more developed in the field of the culture. So the aim is to implement the methodology in these countries to find how audience is same or different in the different European capitals, and to show also the use and usefulness of this approach for the theaters themselves, to be able to first get to know their audience, but also to find new ways how to communicate with them, and how to improve their audience development activities in the sense that they better focus the activity to the audience they have, or to the to the people who they think they should be their audience. So we want to show that this is very useful either for the theaters, but for the municipalities, for the national strategies in culture as a whole. So we hope this will, at least in the Czech Republic, will be the first step to get to know our audiences in the country-wide level.
Achim?
Well, thank you for this introduction of your methodology, which is really thrilling. So I'm looking forward to the publication and to look into me being also kind of a statistics experiment. I'm looking forward to that. One thing that struck me already now is that when we try to, especially in our population surveys done for specific theaters, when we try to differentiate between different types of visitors, not so often visitors, rather frequent visitors, not anymore, never ever, don't know visitors. We found out that considering the social context of the visit is sometimes much more important than even the highest ranking artistic motive or reason for visits. Sometimes even more important than the price. I mean, as an economist, I always say, okay, if it's cheaper, you go often. What a surprise! Sorry to say that, but so I was intrigued by the fact that the social context of you didn't include that. Neither I didn't see it in the segmentation and the description of segments, nor in the questions. So and as I say, what we find always out that it's quite important to look at that to differentiate between different types of visitors, non-visitors, not so often visitors. So how did you include that?
Yeah, it's a really good point. We didn't emphasize it so much in the asset methodology, but it's true that we do find that as an important part of people's reasons for going. We do have there's a list, for example, of motivations, which we do have in it, where we have this double way of doing the motivations. So we ask people all the things that's important, and then the main thing. And we found that, of course, for example, the social aspect, which can be different, but it's usually something to do with wanting to go with friends and family, or or kind of that sort of social experience, does vary, and is often quite important for some of the lower engaged groups. One of the researches we did in the UK a while back was around outdoor arts audiences, so street art, spectacle, circus, and we found that in that those audiences, the social was the most important. It was the most important factor, and social in different ways. So actually, social in the sense of like a civic public pride sort of thing, social in terms of being with other people. That was very, very prominent. And has an interesting relevance to the COVID-19 situation, of course. And also social in the sense of going with people. And I think, you know, often we look at, when we look at the segmentation of people go quite frequently who are more versed in theatre, they tend to be people who go on their own or in couples and two people. And they, you know, for them, it's about who's on stage and what it's about. And not to say that they don't, you know, they don't value social things as well, not least things like the facilities and how we, you know, whether they're going to go for a meal afterwards or beforehand, or those sorts of things as well. So yeah, I think it's a really interesting aspect. And I think one of the things that is often lacking in research is people don't think to even ask that. You know, and yeah, it's when you talk to audiences, it's absolutely right up there as a key reason for being involved in arts and culture.
So are there some other studies or papers available about European audiences, or is the ESSET project unique in comparing European audiences? Just to answer a question from our attendees, I shared in the chat the webpage of the ESSET project, and the project will finish by the end of June this year. So for late May or beginning of June, we are planning the final conference, and the book will be launched with all the results. But back to my question, in your knowledge, do you know about some other ways how to compare European audiences?
Is that a question for me? There isn't much. You have to be clever and go and find it from different sources. So if you want to go to a very basic level, the actual Eurobarometer work from the European Commission is actually really, I find really interesting and useful.
That was my question. How useful is it?
Well, I find it useful because it's got some nice things in, for example, around identity, which no one ever thinks to ask in this, like, but if you're doing as we are, evaluating European capital of culture, it's very interesting, and actually very interesting from a British point of view. Like, do you identify with your town, your nation, or Europe, for example, to put it as boldly as that? So that can be quite useful. And there are a few studies around in terms of people's overall cultural participation or consumption, let's call it that. That's what it is really. But I think what you have to go to is more micro studies. So when people have done a study somewhere for some reason, it's quite, I mean, there's, for example, I don't know if Bogner's involved in this, but in Warsaw, there's been some interesting studies there where they've tried to segment the public as a whole around culture, and sometimes from a social science point of view rather than a cultural organization point of view. And that's interesting, and actually interesting when you look at it, how similar it is to some of the research that we do directly with audiences, which I think resonates in different places.
Achim?
So a few comments. I mean, I don't know whether we are already in the section about European audience. I think we are. So thank you for this Eurobarometer thing, because the Eurobarometer, they also have these qualitative researches they publish, but they also have this kind of very kind of basic in its methodology. Yeah. The statistics about attendance, they call it participation, but yeah, basically it's attendance to cultural offers. So looking only kind of a very, very simple thing, kind of cinema, they distinguish cinema, live event, and cultural site. Cultural site meaning anything from a monument to an arts museum. And live event, anything from a rock pop concert to experimental contemporary theater. But what always strikes me when I look at that is that it shows you, yes, it shows you cross-country differences. For instance, it shows you that attendance to that, as bleak as the methodology might be, between, for instance, the highest ranking Scandinavian countries, and comes kind of the core European countries like UK, France, Germany, mostly at the same level. And then other countries kind of falling a bit shorter on that. So with this very bleak methodology, they show differences. And what strikes me always is, I mean, especially I would come to that. We've been working as a research partner in the European Theatre Network from 2012 to 17, Theatron, and have published a book from that research. And what strikes me is that these figures there relate so little to what is kind of the common perception of audience development efforts and effectiveness. Especially looking at kind of the declared goal and prescriptions and data collection and audience orientation in the United Kingdom, for instance, and seeing that participation with its very bleak measures stays in the midfield. And with the differences kind of, especially due to kind of the influence of income and education being as high or even higher, for instance, in the UK, with this very simple methodology, whereas countries that have kind of functioning social or social democratically oriented societies, like the Scandinavian countries, ranking better in that. So this very simple, I can only recommend that. I got them in my slides, the source for that. I only can recommend to look into that. This doesn't mean for me, and it's so important for me, I always show it to a lot of theater persons when I say, but the UK and oh man, we are doing so bad, they're doing so good. Yeah. And then I always say, I don't say, okay, no, they're not doing good. I always say, yes, they are doing good. But be aware that whatever you do, how many efforts you may take, the impact on society might be much less than you might expect. So this was a very, very important finding out of these Eurobarometer things. Because, for instance, it also shows that participation of non-EU born citizens in the UK is at the same level or worse than in Central Europe, with all audience development activities. So it's really kind of something that helps to become pragmatic in what you can achieve by everything. Because in the end, there's a very small French book that I absolutely love. It's by Rancière, Jacques Rancière. I don't know whether you know. It's called the Emancipated Visitor, le spectateur émancipé. And he says, in short, that visitors are emancipated. They are choosing according to their preferences, and increasingly so. And within and after COVID, even more so. So it has become more important. And it shows that, you can only achieve so much, whatever you do. And this makes it only more important to look in what not only your visitors, but also the wannabe visitors, and what would make them come. So, and then, perhaps there will be a point also that I can point out some things from the research we did for we also did a cross-country research for the European Theatre Foundation in 2012 and 13 and 14. So yeah, we also found out that differences kind of, it's more between genres, more between types of theaters, more between programs, and what you really try to do for your audience, how that relates to their specific needs, than cross-country differences. Very important too, but program, how you communicate, how do you relate to your constituencies. This is what makes you important, what makes you successful in audience development.
Thank you for this comment, because maybe to explain also the topic of today's discussion, we are not just lovers of statistics, but we want to see the reason why we are talking and researching the audience, and the importance also for cultural policies and cultural strategies. So thank you for this comment. Achim, do you want to share something from your research you've just mentioned?
I would, whoops, excuse me. I haven't prepared so much, but I can. One thing that I wanted to point out, and this relates to the segmentation. It's basically only one file which I found, which I also always find quite intriguing. This is the thing about the Eurobarometer that I was pointing out to. There's the link, so you can look that up. Everything that is there, I already said. But what always strikes me is this ranking. So what we did in this theater network, we conducted research. It was a theater network with 11 theaters across Europe. One in Prague, Aachen, Aachen. There we did also audience survey. So data also corresponds to that, comes from that, and. So we did kind of chose a different, we chose a different approach when it comes to motives. We are asking what people are expecting from their theater visit. And so it's a set of questions that changes sometimes a little bit, but it's a set of more or less 15 to 16 items that we always choose more or less in the same way, and then it gets complemented by a few others which are specific for the given theater. And then we had a ranking which included both the theaters in Theatron and the research we did there, and research we did independently from Theatron in the Center for Audience Development. And what is pretty solid is that there's this group of 5 to 6 highest ranking motives, which is always kind of a very general term, interest in art and culture. So no surprise, and that's highest up. But then second is good entertainment. Third is to experience something live. Fourth is pleasant atmosphere. And fifth, high artistic quality, which is most often, which we found out comparing that with qualitative research. We did interviews in the given theaters, group discussions, all that, which is more often related to virtuosity. So given the fact that there's a dancer who really kind of obviously technically capable of something that me as an audience or a spectator can't do, or a musician who can play its instrument very, very well, or a body of an orchestra playing very, very well. So this often doesn't reflect to what artists or directors or dramaturgs refer to as artistic quality, kind of the mise en scène, the stage design, all that. So from the audience point of view, this often is not so closely related to artistic quality as artists sometimes well consider. And only then afterwards comes new impressions, for instance, which we also have into kind of to get inspired by new impulses, get inspired by new artistic impressions, comes afterwards. This might change for different genres or for different types of aesthetics, and you might have audiences that where for instance this new impulses rank higher. If you're looking at the audience of a contemporary dance theater, which is specialized in that, then that will rank higher, of course. But kind of in a broad sense, this was true across all our European studies, and we did them for the European Theatre Foundation. We did a research on Cyprus. We did it here in Denmark. We did it in Sweden. In Switzerland. So this holds across Europe, and really kind of the difference between countries were less important than between genres. This is why we don't go so much into a cross-country comparison in our results also. And it shows also that this type of motives, which are not at all related to, or not at all, not so much related to what is actually on stage, what is offered, are equally important than the offer itself. It shows, for instance, that the building, the atmosphere of the building, might be as important as the program that you offer. Finding that we also found a show to be hold across theaters and be kind of that relates even to this very old research on the third space, sociologists in the US in the 60s, 70s. So this is not so new, but it has to be reinstated. You know? So just a glimpse that from our point of view, it's really kind of worth to look at the broad set of motives, which include not only artistic experience.
Some comments by Michal or Jonathan?
Yeah, maybe I could share some information about the about the research we did on Prague online audience, let's say, in pandemics. And there's few things that I think there it might be interesting to hear about the motivations of the audience to follow the online culture, let's say. But and maybe if Jonathan wants to reflect or react directly on some of the thoughts I can present it, I will give you the floor.
I think it's really interesting. I think my only comment is that that I think it's important for us to remember that those motivations are different for different groups of people. That's one of the key things. There was when we first did the audience finder research in the UK, which is one of the first major pieces of research done in the whole public of cultural tensions in about 2013, there was shock where we found that the top reason for wanting to go to cultural events overall was for entertainment. And people were like, oh my God, but we're not doing entertainment, we're doing art, you know. But I think what you have to understand is how people think about it. I mean, when there's nothing, you know, we spend a lot of time saying there's nothing wrong with entertainment. That doesn't mean it's shallow. Do you know what I mean? I think people get some of these things mixed up a bit. And I think that we need to be comfortable with these things that people think and say.
Okay, so let's move now from the research of audiences in pre-COVID times, because also the asset research was done partly before COVID-19 pandemic started. Partly some data was collected also during the pandemic, but I think that mainly the outcomes will talk about pre-COVID audiences. But well, what has changed with this pandemic? What has changed with this radically changed contact of theaters with their audiences? What do we know about this? We should talk about this topic in this part of our webinar. And before Michal presents the research from the city of Prague, I would like to ask Bogna to share with us her study. Am I right, Bogna, that it was elaborated for the Zbigniew Flashevsky Theatre Institute?
The situation was kind of complicated because I started this research for my own purposes. Mm-hmm. Being honest, I didn't want to lose this occasion. Every researcher, every sociologist, you know, were researching on something. I was like, okay, this is the moment I need to do something. So I did the survey. I came to collect data, and then institute got interested with it. and helped me to reach more people to respond. And that's why I'm very grateful. Now we are waiting for the publishing of this report, and it's first from the whole series of reports that later started to be actually commissioned by the Institute of Zbigniew Raszewski. And all these reports are gonna show this COVID situation from different perspectives, like from institutional one, artist one, audience, etc., etc. But I think I can easily say my was the opening one, and that's why I also did that during our first lockdown. Now we are having, I don't know, third or fourth, or we are still, you know, under lockdown. So so it's probably changed. We could do the research again, but it was in this very first situation when actually cultural activities changed completely. Yes, so this is it. So I would like to show my presentation right now. Okay. Okay. Oh, do you see something? Okay, thank you. So, first of all, I wanted to answer a few questions. I mean, do really theater spectators benefit from a remote offer of theaters? What are the advantages and disadvantages of this form of offer? And what are the reasons for which they are not using this offer? I also wanted to check the obstacles. And I also asked the question about the future of theaters after coronavirus epidemic. However, it's not over yet, so it's hard to say. Today we had update of restrictions in Poland. Museums and galleries, art galleries are going to be open like in few days, but theaters are still closed. So we have to wait for the results and the situation, like development of the situation. Survey details. It took kind of a long time because it was 6 weeks of collecting data, but it was because Institute helped me. The survey was on Google Forms. As I told you, I wanted to do it on my own purposes, so it was like very economic one. And the survey was composed from closed single and multiple choice questions and open questions. I used Snowball method. And as I said, I got support from the Institute. And here I try to compare frequency of using theatrical offer before COVID and online offer. And as you can see here, people who took part in the survey were, we can call them not really heavy users, but intense users. These were people for whom theater is really important part of everyday life. So we can see that most of them were visiting theaters several times a month or several times a year, or at least once a month. And then online offer, we can see that most of my respondents, they were watching spectacles several times a week, which is really a lot. I mean, my favorite respondent, she watched actually 85 performances online, which I find kind of unique. However, 30% of people who before COVID were visiting theaters often, they stopped using this offer at all, yeah, because of different, many reasons. Okay, sorry, I always get lost a little bit with these presentations. I also asked about the factors. Here you can see only the 6 most important ones, but in general there was something like 19 factors. I mean, there is not a huge difference between what's the most important, because at the first place here and here is the repertoire and the need for a cultural experience, and this also means embodied experience in this first case and the lack of embodied experience in the second case. But there is a change in the date. Yes, so normally day is much more important than hour, and during watching it at home, it's hour is much more important than day, because each day is similar to like each day. So that's important. And here, of course, the important factor was a price. Here it doesn't exist because especially during our first lockdown, performances were for free. I mean, and they were, it was mostly registrations, not transmissions. Now it changed. We have VOD platforms and VOD channels, and it's more about the real time. So it's happening at the theater with empty audience, and people can see this performance at the same time from their own homes. But what appeared here, it's the mental well-being. I mean, this was really important factor for choosing or not choosing online offer. If this mental well-being were worse, then people didn't use it. Yes, so before COVID it appeared, I mean, this was also important, the well-being, but it appeared at I guess 11th place. Yes, so
Ogna, sorry, we see all the time the first slide.
So thank you for saying. Okay, so I have to. This is why it's always problematic. Sorry, because I have I have tables. Do you see it right?
Yes,
right?
yes. Now it moves. Yeah.
Okay, so I'm gonna. I can't use it for the full screen option because then it stops. It freezes somehow. I don't know why. So sorry. This is what I was talking about. So here you can see all the numbers and all the factors. As you can see, the mental well-being is here. It didn't appear here at all. And the main difference is about the day and the hour. I can also show the slide before. Do you see it right now? I mean here, the frequency. So
yes.
Here is the frequency. I'm gonna send my presentation later. So for people who would like to read it more carefully, everything is here. It's also information about with who my respondents were going to theater and with whom they were using online offer. Of course, here in online offer, it's not very surprising that most of them were watching performances alone, but they were also watching it with some with bigger groups, with friends. However, it wasn't very popular. It's only 2%. And with a partner, husband or wife, or like the close partner. Yes. And here I also in my first group, so people who were visiting theaters before COVID, there was also a big part. It's 20% of people who go to theater alone. Yes. So this is also, I think, some element of being a theater heavy user. I mean, then it's not important. I mean, the social aspect is important in this way that every time if you go to theater, you meet some friends, because they're just there, but you don't have to really go with someone to make it a social experience. But I also had some introverts, and for them, the online offer was the biggest happiness of their lives. I mean, but they didn't have to share this experience with people finally. And I think that this is the aspect of taking part in some cultural experiences at events that we didn't really research before. I mean, especially in Poland, this introvert part. And I find it a very important group of people to whom we can get access right now, because they don't have to be obliged to sit next to someone or to go to theater with a partner because they want us to go there. Yes, so I find it really, really very important and interesting. Okay, so what are advantages and disadvantages of the online offer? First of all, advantages. This is in Poland. I don't think it's only in Poland, but breaking down geographical barriers. So it means that you don't have to go by train or car to other city to see the performance. You can just see many of them, also international ones, which is for people for whom theater is important. This is the only possibility to do that. Yes. And of course, it's also like you can zoom details. It means that of course, this is also disadvantages because camera, it chooses the perspective of the viewer. But for people with, for example, worse sight, I'm also one of these persons. This is very important that you can see details, finally, faces, elements. And some of my respondents, they were preparing spaces. So they're a private audience at their home, and it was some kind of not everyday event, yes. Of course, we can say that people were also dressing up, but it was rather like the changing of the, I don't know, the sports suit for something less sport, but it was still comfortable. What else? Time. I mean, during our first lockdown week, we had access to archival performances. People could catch up with the offer. They were saving time or filling time. It depends on if they had children or not. Like for people with children, it was much more difficult to find time for watch performances. It's also important, of course, it's not possible in real theater. I never would like it to be possible, but respondents, they could manage the viewing process. So this is this factor of agency, that you can make a decision right now. I don't want to watch it right now because I don't like it. I can leave, yeah, even if you can leave virtually. So of course there are some people who do it in theater, but it's perceived as something which is not very cultural, let's say that. It's not, here the savoir-vivre, it doesn't exist in this form, and I find it important because it's also, I also think that during our COVID time, this is the shift into the theoretical reflections about audience. Before, there were some people who were like, okay, spectator, he can buy the ticket and then he doesn't have to appear in the theater. And now, like people, I mean, if institutions, they start to recognize that really audience is something very, very important. So also all this agency and decision making, I find it important aspect during the real visit in theater, but not as a managing a viewing process. But I think it's important to take into account what really people think who are, you know, watching the performance. What else? We can watch also performances that we would normally not go to, which is important because it gives opportunity to see and to visit theaters that wouldn't be the theaters of our first choice. In Poland, like the price is still an important factor. So if you have to choose between the theater you know and like and the one which you probably would like to go, but it's not sure, then you don't go there. It's also very important issue of inclusiveness. I think that during the COVID time, theater started to implement the slogan accessible culture. And this is not only, I told you about introverts, but it's also about people with different disabilities. Sometimes theaters in Poland, not all of them, I think that it's really small amount of theaters that are prepared for having people with different disabilities. And this time it starts to be easier to watch it. So I find, I mean, in future, I find some really new perspectives for opening the offer and to getting to new groups. And of course, some cognitive values, so some sense of self-development and looking for new forms of expression, using new, I mean, it's not new, I mean, internet is not new, but for some creators, it's still like new language to use and to think of the ways of virtual meetings with spectators. And of course, well-being. I think that this all aspect of therapeutic value, the temporary control of anxiety, the distraction from negative thoughts caused by COVID, this is what theater gave to their spectators. Okay, so disadvantages. Of course, I find it as a sociologist and anthropologist, I find all rituals very important, and here we don't have it. So people, because like if you visit theater, it's not only about being there, it's not only about watching it, but it's also about everything what you do before you go there. So all these preparations with your clothes, body, friends, drinking wine with friends, eating something, talking about it. This is this exit ritual, some kind of a rite de passage, but here we don't have it. Yes, what can you do? You can just leave from one room to another if you have 2 rooms. Yes, so this is it. It's also about multisensory aspect of theatrical experience. So all these comfortable or uncomfortable chairs, the smell of the theater, everything which is like this embodied experience. We call the next thing is na żywość. We call it this way in Polish. It's liveness, yes, like some, or liveness probably. It's that it's recreation instead of experience. That it's not real. It's not, you know, it's not living. Also, it's the problem, it's the lack of the unity of the reception time, of the time of creation. Now it changed a little bit with these online transmissions, which are happening in the real time. And as I said, especially at the beginning, because now it changed, we have some performances produced on Zoom, and they are happening in the real time on Zoom. For example, it's the enter full screen of Wojtek Ziemilski. It's also for English-speaking spectators. So this is using Zoom, but as I think it was the first performance, and it didn't happen during our first lockdown. It happened probably during holiday break. I'm not sure. Here I have to check it. And what else? I mean, registration and transmission impose a specific point of view, which can be advantage and disadvantage. And it's also this mix of worlds and realities, the domestic one with the theatrical one, and you have to take care of your kid or dog or someone, and then you still are watching theater play. And I also find this reason very important. I mean, in case of sharing registration, especially at the beginning, creators and actors, they were not paid. So all this salary system, and in Poland, we have very serious problems with salary system and employment system in general. For example, with contracts, sometimes they are not signed before actual work, and then if they are not signed, you know, many bad things can happen. And I think this is the moment when you really need to start the important debate of how the salary and employment system should work, because now many actors have to really change their profession. I don't know if it's happening also in your countries, but in Poland, with each day, one actor is changing profession for something which is not really being an actor. Yes, so I find the situation critical right now, especially that there is no perspective of opening theaters, even with this, taking care of all these hygienic restrictions. Yes, so now it's like, I don't know, 5th or 4th month of when theaters are closed. So I think that for this time, it's all because I have some recommendations, but it's probably for saying something about it later. And sorry for the problems with my presentation. It freaks me out sometimes that it doesn't work.
No problem, Bogna. Thank you very much. It was really very interesting insight. There were some questions also, if the attendees can get your presentations.
Of course. I also, I mean, now I don't know how to stop sharing this. Did it happen? Am I sharing it all the time?
Yes, you are sharing it still. So just go to the share the screen option and try to.
Okay. Oh, okay.
Yes, that's it. And just to comment your remark about the compensations for canceled shows, it's very much discussed also in our country, especially in the independent performing arts sector. And there were really different strategies chosen by the theater companies here, how to compensate the artists during the lockdown. But then if I explain everything, then we are in completely different topic about the precarity of the sector. So let's get back to the audiences, but maybe also therefore the numbers and data about audiences are important to get arguments and justifications how to compensate and how to sustain the sector also in these very difficult times.
One more sentence. I just want to say the situation is different from people who work in national theaters and different for private ones. I mean, the private ones are probably in the worst situation right now. So there are some, let's say, some help from the country for the national ones, but for the rest, I mean, the situation is really horrible right now.
Yes, exactly. And it will probably remain for some time yet. Michal, in August last year, the city of Prague commissioned a survey which was called Culture Online. Would you present or share with us some findings from this survey? And maybe can you comment quickly or make some comparison to Bogna's findings?
Yes, sure. I will go through it briefly. It's a lot of slides, but I will go for quickly and just stop by by some of the data. I must say, in many ways, I'll probably repeat what Bogna said, maybe, or at least I should, because I think the main points are pretty similar. So before I start the presentation, just I want to say that also here in the Czech Republic, the COVID pandemics showed a lot of problems in the system of labor and the payment and the employing people in culture field, and it's really disastrous for the private segment of the culture, and I mean either the entrepreneur part and the non governmental non-profit organizations. So here comes the presentation. It was done very last moment, and I'm sorry that some of it is not translated into English, so I will comment on it. Can you see the presentation, please?
Yes.
Perfect. So it was, as you said, it was done in August and September this year, which was a short break, let's say, between the two waves of the pandemic, which in the Czech Republic, the first one was as mild and easy as hard and difficult was the second one, which actually never finished. But by at the time when we issued the research, we thought we were already behind the worst phase of the pandemics, but it was very far from true. As you said, the research was commissioned by the city of Prague and performed by my colleague Barbara White, who's a colleague in my department of arts management on the theatre faculty of the Academy of Performing Arts in Prague, and it was also with great help with MOL CZ, which is the Czech server and online products provider in the Czech Republic. We aimed for identifying the audience of the online culture. We want to find out what the motivations and what is really their behavior when consuming the culture online. Barbara, my colleague, she prepared the methodology, and we used the online questionnaire with over 30 questions to be distributed mainly by the MOL, CZ, and other operators, as well as Prague City Hall and our university itself. We got 528 responses in 4 weeks, which was mainly Prague residents, which is actually what we aimed for. Quite similarly to offline culture, we got almost 60% of women participating. So in this sense, I think it's representative and comparable to cultural consumption offline as well. And more than half were university educated. About the short demography of the respondents, most of them were based in residents of Prague and smaller cities around Prague mainly. More women participated than men, which, as I said, is usual in cultural consumption. The age is quite diverse. We had 34% of people from 20 to 30, bit less from 30 to 40, and again 34% for 40 to 50, and the rest you can see. So it was quite, let's say, consistent. Most of the, let's say, half of them, of the respondents were university educated. Most of them had high school education. This is the salaries. Again, I think what we can say, the audience of the online cultural products is pretty diverse. There's no specific group that would really be dominant in this. We were trying also to find out, to have a comparison to our asset findings in the asset research about the taste of the audience, and we found out that the audience that we gained was pretty diverse again. So most of the people don't have really a preference between the new experimental arts and the classical forms. This question asked about the necessity for the people to know as much as they can about the product before they consume it. So here you see that a bit slightly more people prefer to know, to get the information beforehand, rather than just give it a chance and risk what comes out. This is kind of this graph shows the proportion between the people who prefer the well-known artists, let's say, in theaters or in the online programs, so those who play it safe and want to see the known faces are on the left, and those who want to risk to explore new talents and faces are on the right. This graph shows what are the usual preferences of art forms for the respondents. So most of them, and that's what we aim for, is the theater audience. So the drama theater is number one. 70% of the respondents do prefer the drama between as one of the preferred genres, let's say. Then it's movie and audiovisual art, pop rock and rock music and other genres come third, and art and design, literature, and so forth. In general, we found out that our respondents did consume more than 3 online products, let's say, which was, as I repeat, in August and September. So it was, let's say, after 5 months of the pandemics, since the pandemic started. So in those, can be we can say that they saw at least one or one product or one show in 1 or 2 months. 26% saw 1 or 2 shows, and then the rest declared that they either did not see any online shows or they were just about to do that. So this is what form of the online product the audience prefers. No preference is 37%, which is most the biggest part of the respondents, and about the same portion is the audience that prefers the pre-recorded shows or products. Only 23% of the audience saw or preferred to see the online shows as a live stream, which is quite important, quite interesting, I think, and we'll come back to it. But it's not very. It shows that it's not so important for people to see the or consume the product just live, let's say. Why they would choose the recordings? The major answer here is that the pre-recorded things allow people to see, to consume the show whenever it suits them best. So again, this will repeat in between when I talk about the barriers, because it's one of the biggest barriers we found out in asset project as well. It's the time and the lack of time, let's say, the audience has. Most usually, the audience consumes the online culture at the evenings after 6 p.m. 20% do not prefer any specific time. What is the most preferred type of content consumed online? It's between, of course, the usual theater audience is the streams and recordings of the theater performances. Then again, the streams of concerts and music productions, then discussions, talk shows, and so on. Then maybe if I follow if I go on, then it's the let's say educational talks, and then only the film databases and so on. The pandemics or the shift of the audience to the online is has one benefit which shows on this slide, which is that more than half of the audience did discover a new artist or theater or a theater company that would that they liked, that they did not know before the pandemics. And here come the barriers, which is, as I mentioned before, the biggest one is not having enough time to consume the culture, which is much more important for most of the people than financial barrier, which is on the second spot, and then followed by the being afraid to get infected, and physical barriers. Also, 21% of the respondents declare that they don't feel any barriers actually. And this is the advantages, which probably would be kind of similar, in other words, with what Bogna presented. So the most important three are losing the feeling of the spot, let's say, of the venue, and the full experience of the visit of the cultural event. The loss of the contact with the artist, which was mentioned also, and also what 37% of respondents declared as a issue in following the culture online. It's not a very good technical level of the recording or the stream, which is caused by theaters often presenting the recordings of their shows, which were not previously intended to be shown to the public, or rather some technical records and so on. 28% declared that they lack the possibility to share the moment with any company, again, which is something I will come back to. And what we found out that for 81%, there's no technical barriers, that most of the Czech homes have sufficient technical equipment. What information channels do respondents use to find information about the culture online? It's mainly social networks, the profiles of the organizations, followed by the profiles of their friends, the websites, and only then the cultural servers and websites, and social the profiles on social networks of the cultural media and general media as well. And so what is the motivation or reasons to look for the culture online? It's mainly, as Jonathan pointed out earlier, it's fun. They want to be amused in the first place, and also they want to relax, which is 55% of the responses, but they also want to be educated in 47%. They want to actively fulfill their free time, and 35% declare they want to be intellectually stimulated, and 29% declared they want to be they look for the aesthetical experience, and then it's followed by professional interest and just being curious about the new interactive type of experience. Quickly about the economy, this graph shows how the respondents paid or supported the culture financially, the online culture organizations, which is 24% in the first place. It's by paying the usual ticket for the digital product. Then the second one is gift paid online to the account of the organization. Another 22% said they don't feel like paying for the content. 21, they haven't paid so far, but they were about to. Well, and I will just skip the rest quickly, because this is mainly about what the respondents thought about coming back to the usual life after the free wave of pandemics, which, as I said, was not the worst that we were about to experience. So in the beginning of autumn, the people were thinking some were thinking they would come back to life, back to normal very soon, but they didn't, as we know. But they assumed that they would come back that they would also consume the culture online and offline after the pandemics, after the first wave, in 55%. So this is probably what would slightly change after the whole experience we have with COVID. But in general, I think this is a hope we have that the most people will come back to consume the offline culture or attend offline cultural events, but it seems they also will combine it, or they will also use their new experience with the online culture consumption and combine the both things. So let me skip this. I've been talking a lot already, but what I wanted to conclude with is really that I think after there's positive things about our online experience, not about the virus itself, but that, as Bogna also mentioned, it gives us opportunity to bring new audiences to theaters. It also gives opportunity for new audiences to participate in culture, whether they're people who are not feeling well between a lot of big crowded places, and between in the crowd of people. Either they're old, either they're sick, either they're somehow they have any kind of barriers that make them not to come to theaters personally, but still want to consume the culture. So I think for the theaters and arts organizations, they should even now work on their future strategies, which will include the online products in their portfolios, not to replace their usual productions, but to help them communicate with the audience, find new audience, and help the audience to overcome the barriers they can't overcome without the digital form of arts. That's
Thank
it.
you, Michal. Thank you for these results. So now maybe I ask Achim and Jonathan if you have some data from your countries about online audiences, and if they are the same, the findings are the same on and observations, or if there are some very different results or topics which are followed in the surveys. Achim.
Yes, thank you. Just to say, we don't have any survey yet to present, but what we are currently doing is that we have at the moment only qualitative, but coming up the quantitative part, research asking different actors of the theater scene, theater world, on their experience, how they were impacted, and how they chose both analog and digital strategies and measures to react to that. And I will skip the analog part, although that is also interesting as a lookout, because I don't know what about you, but we found that even the 20% of seats that were offered, more or less, in this in between the two waves, they were in about 50% of the theaters we talked to, they weren't sold out. So the audiences were so insecure about the situation that they didn't come, and that it was really reduced kind of to the core of the audiences who really came. So that also as a lookout. But really kind of what we were also looking into was, of course, streaming. I mean, in Germany, with the theaters we were talking to, there was a common sense that streaming, there was kind of second best to what was actually going on. But a few things also as a comment or question to Michael. What we found out is that a few theaters who did that on a good let's say artistic level, they started with quite good figures, like of 3,500 views per production over a given point of time, over a different period of time, but then quite quickly going down to only on an average 1,000, ranging from 600 to 2,000 for a pretty big theater. So and on the other hand, a trend rather to create events. You said that, okay, or Bogner also, that this was the advantage and very important to most of them who were kind of preferring to stream that at any given point of time. We found out that it was equally important for this success, the first successes to be reproduced, to create events out of the productions coming out. Sometimes even as there's one big thing, kind of that the Deutsche Theater did. They did the premiere of a pre-premiere of the Zauberberg, which was really well. They hired a camera team and a dramaturg for doing the live audio and video sequencing. And that went a bit viral, with really getting 15,000 views almost. But in general, and this is also coming to the most important last point you said, kind of that from most experience we heard about was that it was more or less attracting the same audience, the same type of audience, than the usual theater production would be. One responsible for digital sparte, a digital genre, digital department in a large state theater told me, well, you have to be aware that, of course, no matter how which channel you choose, but you will in the first place reach your common audience, because they are aware of that offer, and they will choose, unless you really go into different communities. So in Germany, there are now experiments by streaming, not only on the pages, but also by Twitch, for instance. So really tapping into gaming communities or programmer communities. So really going into different social kind of contexts. And that is really kind of the way where you can break down. On the other hand, there's this, of course, this further regional reach, and this is what we really found out, that kind of for festivals and conferences, there's this possibility to stream, also combined with the possibility to have some 2D or 3D or VR even surrounding to embed it. This is a really large surplus. So, for instance, the famous Theatertreffen in Berlin really already in the first run really had largely increased viewer and participant rates, obviously. So especially for this platforms of exchange, this proves to be very, very successful, and is at least now also increasingly combined with different, not only Zoom, but combined with nice kind of 2D environments like WonderMe, or as I said, like the 3D VR Mozilla Hubs, VR chat, or even customized solutions as they did. So this is really something that we saw as a new development and as a new reach, kind of developing new reach. But what kind of perhaps we had to, sometimes I think we are too perfectionists in Germany to that extent, because all the theater makers that I'm trying to say, oh yeah, but streaming, you know, yeah, we have to do that, but actually it should go in a different direction. And so the different direction that we are looking at, and this is also kind of, would be interesting for me to hear whether there are data on that, is that there, in parallel to this kind of more distant kind of viewer experience, there is also a trend kind of at least a share of visitors looking for a new proximity, a new intimacy, going into interactive formats, looking for the back channel, looking for, like in Twitch, where you can chat in parallel, or to look into gaming, kind of theater game context, even in virtual reality. So there's a theater that has been kind of to overcome this technology gap that exists when it comes to virtual reality sets available. That's by coincidence, no, not by coincidence, but they already had from a former production 550 VR sets. So that produced a specific content for this, and they're now producing additional productions in that. And they are developed, so you can hire these VR sets, and so they're delivered to you with a box, like a home entertainment set, like a box. You can. It was at some point also done by pizza delivery, very funny. So they use this thing also as an audience development measure, so to get this immersive experience across. So we see this also as a development. It would be very interesting. They're completely booked out. They're going national now, so you can in the future will be able to order these VR sets either as a private person or up to the size of classes. So that as a school class, you could hire you can rent 25, 30 VR sets and watch this theater online. So they don't have, until now, they only have figures on the, excuse me, on the usage, which basically says they can't cover the demand that there is. But we don't have statistics, but we know that these are developments that work. Yeah, I think this is not so important, but I think these were the things, the trends. There's a return of the good old audio walk, the augmented reality type. So this were every theater that we were talking to who did this. And who did this well, they're having large successes with that, which also goes parallel to the fact that the most successful theaters doing analog programming, they re-established their audience basis, not the least by doing full-scale open air performances. So this goes perhaps hand in hand to have this kind of, yeah. And on the other hand, of course, what we also see, kind of outreach, education, video tutorials, podcasts, video channels, they are blooming. I see that also. I've been following. I'm dancing, so I've had the great pleasure to dance to video tutorials of Sadler's Waltz in London. Incredible, and I saw the click rates there. They are really amazing. So also going on kind of what theaters can do, and not everyone can perform. Well, everyone can perform, perhaps also this online service, but really have a close look at your click rates compared with other people, and perhaps then start, okay, if there's something interesting, go into a qualitative way. These were kind of qualitative discussions, focus groups, some interviews, very easy and hands-on. But these were kind of some of the trends, some of the findings that we had from this kind of more supply side oriented experiences. Thank you.
Interesting if this will be the same also when the audiences will get back to the venues. All these platforms and tools. Jonathan, how about UK? Is there some data about online audiences, or do you have some recommendations also how to research?
We have quite a lot, but I'm a little bit mindful of time. I don't want.
Yeah.
Don't want to,
I think we can make maybe 6-7 minutes more.
Okay, I'll just show a couple of slides which I think are relevant, and maybe afterwards we can share the. I've got a few more PowerPoints and that sort of thing. But it's interesting, just following on from what Hakim was just saying about those audiences. One of the other things that we found that's interesting is a new international audience for some theatres. So one of the things that it's kind of, in a way, it's so obvious, but it's been missed, the fact that when you go online, you can have a global audience. So some of the organisations we've been working with in Galway, European Capital of Culture in Ireland, they've completely locked down, and there was the whole European Capital of Culture thing has got a lot to do with going to the place and going to the restaurants and spending money there and all that sort of thing. And of course, that just hasn't been able to happen. But what has happened is, because they've moved a lot of their work online, the cultural partners, they've suddenly found an audience in America or Australia or, in Europe, where there were, those people would not normally be able to go to Ireland. So I think that's an interesting thing that's yet to be seen. I'll just show you a couple of slides here because one of the things we've been working on that's a bit different from other people is we've been doing this thing called the Participation Monitor, which is different from others in that it's about the overall population in the UK. It's not just people who go to theatre. We spent about 6 months lobbying to get the money for this, and eventually we got it in October, and we've done it in collaboration with Centre for Cultural Value at the University of Leeds and these two other organisations. I mention it because it's quite interesting, because it gives you, what we've been able to do is ask other questions about the population. So they're panel surveys, specially recruited, so they might or might not have been to the theatre, for example. And you see that some of these things are really important. It goes back to a really key point, I think, which is that COVID-19 here has had big impacts, but it's varied. Have a look at this time and money. So 47% of the people in the population say they have more time to spare than before. 12% saying they have less time. 23% have more money. There's a certain section of the population who were spending money on disposable income, like going on holiday, who are not spending that money, and they are accumulating money. But on the other hand, lots of people have lost their jobs, have less money. There are some interesting contexts around that. I'm going to skate over this, but one of the things we did have a look at is how things have changed before lockdown and after lockdown. And you can see that something like, this survey was done October, November 2020, and we asked people about their experience since March 2020. Actually, let me just quickly go back to that previous slide, because there's an interesting phenomenon here, which is that some activities, this is not necessarily cultural, have increased. So people going on a walk or cycle for leisure has gone up from 39% of the population to 75%. You've got people doing more DIY, that's in British terms, that's doing home improvements and that sort of thing. Gardening, gone up. So, it's worth remembering that how people's habits have changed a bit. I'm not quite sure what that means, but let's remember that. These are arts activities. Look at those things like what we got here: play, drama, musical. In the 12 months before lockdown, in person, 37% of the population going, afterwards 4%. That's in person. This is digital engagement, which we find is maybe a little bit lower than people have estimated, but it's still high. 33% of the population say they watched a performance or event online between March and November 2020. And these are the sorts of things they did. You can have a look at this on another day, but actually of all the things, the most popular was watching a play, drama or musical. By the way, where that was is a key thing. Okay, this just want to mention, it goes back to the key point that these are our own segments, don't worry about those, but they do go higher, lower and lower, higher, medium and lower engaged in the culture, generally speaking. And it varies a lot. A key thing is younger people wanted more digital first material and older people more streamed material. Online payment, this was discussed briefly, Mikhail was mentioning this. Worth mentioning that a huge amount of online activity has, in that 6-month period, was free. And this is an issue. I think we can't neglect this issue. The National Theatre in London had a huge number of people viewing their streams, partly because they'd already had a history of doing cinema-based, projecting their stuff to cinema. But we worked with them, I think over a 3-month period, they had 13 million attendance, 13 million views of their theatre between April, May, June, July. Many from abroad, but hardly made any money out of it. They were all free. You could donate, but the donations were very low. Where have they gone with this? They've gone with this a subscription form. They've looked at Amazon, they've looked at Netflix, and they've looked at the way in which people consume those. Look at this monthly fee, £8.32. That's around about 10 euros a month. That is very, very similar to the Netflix monthly thing. How it compares to Netflix is another issue, but they have gone to this subscription model, and I think more people will go to this. It's different from the ticketed version. It's different from the donations version. It also makes it possible internationally as well, which I think where some of those people are going to get to. There's the what next thing, as Mikhail's mentioned. I just want to emphasize that different things are important for different segments, as we talked about before. There's a phenomenon going on that's been researched in the last few weeks, which is that this is in Britain, where, as Mikhail rightly mentioned, because UK has grabbed everyone's everyone's vaccine, and vaccination is going completely mad here. It's one of the few things that the UK has managed to do relatively okay in the last year. Everything else has been a disaster. But one of the things that's happened is the older people, it looks like they're beginning to book holidays because they're making a judgment. And that judgment is that from September 2021, things are going to be relatively normal for them. We've got all that data, by the way, is public. It's all public. People can have a look at those when they want to. It's going to carry on. We're going to carry on working us right to the end of 2021. Unfortunately, it's only the UK at the moment, but there are some liaisons with other places around the world. The United States is doing something very similar with Wolf Brown. There we are. Just maybe leave it there for the moment. Leave it there for the moment.
Okay. Thank you very much. Maybe we can stop here and get back to the topic of digital audiences, hopefully in 4, 5, 6 months, when we are back to normal, and see how the developments are, if these expectations and predictions, how people will behave in the future, if online will remain a stable part of performing arts sector or offer to their audiences or not. That's a question not only for artists, not only for culture managers, but also for researchers. I would like to thank you very much for your contributions to this panel. I saw from the reactions of our attendees that they are really interested into your presentations. I would like to say once more that the recording of today's panel will be available on the YouTube channel of the Arts and Theatre Institute. And we will share, if you allow us, also your presentations or the links to the data if they are publicly available. So thank you very much for these hopefully interim results about theater and culture audiences. Hope to see you again either in our webinars or on another occasion. And for the very end, I would like to announce that on 25th February, we have next episode of our Green Thursdays discussion. We will talk about the topic of interactive online formats, which were mentioned also in the research papers presented in this webinar. So we will try to map what are original ways how to relate directly with theater audiences through online platforms and tools. Thank you very much. Stay tuned to our webinars. We are here every fourth Thursday each month, and see you again. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.